Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Fix My Fees podcast, where merchant processing is so boring. I bring on interesting people to come in and have great conversations with them about their business. And I'm your host, Tavious Washington, and we have somebody interesting with us today. We have the founder of Creative Energy Options, which they do leadership development, executive coaching, and behavioral pattern transformation. But the key thing that I like is you've been doing this for over 40 years, which makes you the world leading authority in the pattern aware leadership development. And on top of that, you are an award-winning author of your book, Don't Bring It to Work, which I think is awesome, right? We know how many things we take to and from work and home. And I love that. So thank you for taking this time out with me and joining me today. And it's Sylvia Lafair, everybody.
And I am delighted to be here. I love your energy.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So being at the top of your game for so long, and the fact that you have transformed so many lives, and you've even created different things like I saw from like the glitter effect. How did you get into this industry where you can love it so much to be in it so long? And what are your like favorite parts about it?
That is a great question. And I could only stay in doing what I'm doing because I would see growth and change. It's like a garden. If you just keep planting things that die, at some point you say, why am I doing this? But I've been fortunate and I get feedback over the years. I have people calling me from 15, 20, 25 years ago saying, wait till you hear this. And they call me about the good stuff. It kind of, it's like feeding me to say, keep going, you're in the right direction. And I did not start in the leadership realm. I did start in the personal growth realm. And, it's like my backstory is, and I'll tell it very quickly. I grew up in a family where everything was fine, peaceful. I had to behave. I was one of those pleaser type females of the generation. And when I was 14, my father died suddenly of a heart attack. And after that, everything seemed to change. The family changed. And I began asking more mature questions at a younger age, like, why do people behave the way they do? What happens when, we lose somebody in our family or in our neighborhood or a friend suddenly? And I began to see how different people reacted to difficult situations. And so at that point, I was doing personal development work. I got my degree in psychology and in family therapy, basically because I had to figure out how to help heal my own family. That was the reason for it. And I think most of us go into fields like this because of that. And then one night, this famous night, we were doing a program for parents whose teenagers were sort of driving them bonkers, and the room was pretty full. This was in suburban Philadelphia. And at the end of it, a man walked up to me, and I thought he was going to talk about a son or a daughter. And he said, will you come work with my senior leadership team? I mean, it was truly Tavious out of left field. And I looked at him, I said, why? He said, they're fighting. I said, so what? And he said, but Sylvia, you work with people who have to get along, families, or it's better if they do. They
Right.
have to get along. And this is what I want to tell everybody watching this, keeping that flame of curiosity going. I mean, it made no sense to me. I had no skill in doing leadership work. I was doing family work. But I was curious enough to find out why the heck he said it and what was going to happen if I went in. And I did. And I got them to be able to talk with each other more effectively. So he hired me to keep going. And I bless him to this day because it literally shifted my career into leadership development. Because what I found was what we learned in our original organization, the family, is what shows up in our present organization at work. Ta-da! That's the story.
What is when it comes to like the day-to-day work, when you're working with clients or you're dealing inside the business, what is your favorite part? What's the part that you look forward to the most?
When they thank me because things are better, but till you get to that point, you have to go through a series of things, and you have to go through what I call the ugly middle. Now, listen, I don't like it in my own life. I don't like it in my clients' lives. I'm sure you wouldn't like it in your life, but there's no way out other than through. It's like if you're in the middle of the tunnel, you can decide you can go back and you're going to be the same way you were. And you may not even see the light at the end of the tunnel yet, but you've
Right.
got to keep going through that dark space. And it's where the patterns fight with each other. They literally, the old pattern that says, I'm never going to be able to do X, Y, or Z. And the new pattern that says, of course you can. And there's a place where these patterns will literally battle it out with each other. I've
Mm.
learned how to breathe through it, and it still happens in my own life. But when you get to that place and you know the only way out is through, you kind of stay with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So when people come to you, are they already in chaos? Do they kind of feel it's coming and maybe are trying to get you there before it becomes that way? Where are people in their own journey or business in their own journey before they jump in and work with you?
For the most part, people call me when things are bad. They call me. I mean, I have gone into companies where they have said, I don't even know if this company still exists anymore. It was Roto-Rooter, where you go in because the plumbing is stuck
Yeah, I
and you
remember
got to
that.
unstuck. They go, here comes the Roto-Rooter woman again, Most people will kind of slide through things, but it's when conflict becomes impossible. I mean, I wish people would do it before. That's the best way to do it. And that's why, my new book is called Glimmers at Work, not glitter. Glitter comes later, but it's Glimmers at Work. And it's about the self-aware leader's advantage. Because once we do some personal work on ourselves, we're better leaders. We can hear people differently from when they're saying something. We don't get, and the big thing I want to look at is from triggers to glimmers. A
Mm,
trigger, and we all have them. I still have them. When somebody says something and you don't like it and you inhale and you can't even exhale and you want to attack, you want to protect yourself. We all do it.
we do.
It's natural in us. But there is that moment where I call it the power of the pause, where you've got to take a breath, literally. I
Right.
mean, in and out of
Pause.
your own biology,
Right.
it's there. And you have to wait a second. And then you begin to ask yourself questions, you know, and this is like this. I mean, you're not saying to somebody who said something nasty to you, "Excuse me, I need an hour to pause and reflect on this." You simply learn how to breathe in, breathe out, say, what pattern just showed up for me? And then you have to know that those two patterns, the old one and the new one, are going to fight because you're going to want to say something mean or nasty or or brush them off or say, oh, it's them rather than me.
Right.
And then you have a choice rather than reacting to responding. And it's the biggest becoming self-aware right now is it's pretty big in the leadership and the personal growth realm.
Yeah. Yeah. I, is that what I saw that you have as a part of your service is the glimmers effect? Is that what that is?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
what that
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
Yeah, because I had seen
Because
that.
what happens is, there is this moment when you pause and you make the decision not to react to protect yourself. You want to respond to keep the conversation going so it moves past the conflict. That's the glimmer. And it's a moment. It's just a tiny moment. It can become glitters. I like that. I like what you said at the beginning, but it's a tiny moment where you can say it and do it differently. And people will say, oh, that's, personal growth, or that's, you know, silly, or it's, it works. That's all I can tell you. It works.
Got it. Okay. So what came first, the Glimmers effect or the don't bring it to work? Did like one influence the other when you started with your book? How did you come about of deciding I want to do my first book?
Well, it came about when I went into that very first organization. I
Mhm.
was used to sitting with individuals, couples, and families. And in a family, I had learned over time, in my training, to really listen to each person and not judge, but ask questions. And when I went into this man's organization with his team, and I sat with them, I did what I knew how to do. What I found was that the family and the are quite similar. And here's what I realized. You know, we have parents, we have bosses like parents, right? We have coworkers like siblings. We have salaries like allowances. And we also have a timeout called a performance improvement plan.
I like that.
Yeah. So it's much more similar than you realize. And when I would listen to people, I would hear the comments. Well, John thinks he's the smartest one in the room and he's always, showing off. And I won't tell him anything because if I have an idea, he's going to take it as his own because he thinks he's the greatest one. Well, we have that in families. It's called the super achiever, you
Hmm.
know? And then it's somebody would call me and or be in the room and they would be asked to do something and their plate was already over full. But they'd say, "Of course I will do it." And then they'd call me later and say, "I can't do it." And I'd say, "Why didn't you say something in the team meeting?" "Well, because, I'm not supposed to." And I'd say, "Did you grow up as a pleaser in your family?" And they go, "That's it. That's it." So I began to see, and I put together the 13 most common patterns that I have found that come from home that are in work. So the super achiever is
Mhm.
the me guy or gal. And you look at almost every organization and
Yep.
you'll see people like that. The rebel is somebody who's saying, "I don't like the way this is going." And usually they get really angry. They say, "And by the way, I know the best lawyer in town." The rebel is the one who's there, and they often came from childhoods where they had to fight to be heard, and they felt discounted, and so, it showed up in work, and usually they're the HR nightmare. There's
Mm.
the avoider. I call that the gotta go guy or gal. And they often grew up in families where no conflict was ever resolved and there was a lot of yelling. So they would go to their room and get out of it. And I've watched in meetings when tension really occurs and it's getting really riled up and, red hot. Somebody will say, "Oh my goodness, I forgot I have another meeting and I've got to go."
The
Or they're
cameras
going,
start turning off real
yeah,
quick.
they'll find any excuse to leave, the gotta go guy or guy. So I put together the 13 most common patterns and that's what I've worked with in the workplace. And when I wrote Don't Bring It to Work, which is a nice academic, very thick book. That's why I'm doing the glimmers at work now because it's today you think in shorter sentences. We do. I'm not doing it in sound bites, but the sentences are still shorter. The paragraphs are still shorter, but it's the same essence of when you feel that nervousness of the pattern showing up, doing something differently. It works. It's success. I've been successful with it. And when you asked me earlier what really makes me feel good, it's when people will call and say, "It's so much better. Things are better
Mm.
now." You know,
Right.
that's when I like it.
Do you have like one in particular that stands out that's like that? Like a company or a person that came to you, maybe you felt like you couldn't help them or, and then they had that transformation and came back to you. Do you have that one that kind of like sticks out to you?
Well, I'll tell you a quick story about this was where this man was the head of sales in a pretty large company. And two people had gone to HR claiming that they didn't use the word ogre, but it was pretty close to that. And that, he had favorites. And HR called and said we talked, the gal from HR who I knew fairly well said he's not hearing that everybody's upset because he's very dogmatic. He's very my way or the highway kind of guy. And so I did pre-calls with everybody, and the theme was that, he doesn't listen to anybody. It's his way or the highway. And yes, he has favorites. Okay.
Mm.
And so when I said to him, you know, is that he just blamed the people who went to HR. It's their fault. It's their fault. It's their fault. I said, well, enough people have said it. I think we need to look at it. So anyway, we decided to do an offsite, and this was 2 days. It just happened to be in Washington D.C., which
Yeah.
is an interesting place because the company was global, but he happened to be based there. So there we are. And we go into the first day of the meetings, and I had primed everybody to be able to tell their truths effectively, not and respectfully, but tell their truths. This is how we feel. And that he was to listen. So we get into the beginning of the meeting, and I'm very nice and glad everybody's here and yada, yada, yada. And he said, well, I have something to say. And I had spent some time priming him for this. And out of his mouth comes, I know you're all upset and I'm going to listen, but bottom line, I'm the boss. And if you don't like it, you can vote with your feet. The door is over there. You can leave now. And I thought, I am going to sell sweaters at Nordstrom's. I'm not doing this anymore. I mean, this was within the first 10 minutes of, getting everybody together. Anyway, that day was pretty awful. And at breaks, people would say, I told you he'll never change. I told you, blah, 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 blah. And I thought, well, this may have been the biggest mistake I've ever made. Anyway, we were supposed to have a team dinner that evening, and it was so tense and so unpleasant. I said, look, everybody, just go wherever you want for dinner, enjoy yourselves. And I said to him, but you are coming with me. And we go across, we were not far from the White House, and we go across to this restaurant. I wasn't particularly, I think I was willing to have a cup of tea. My stomach was all in knots too. But anyway, we're sitting there, and at a table right near us were 6 people. Were having a dinner complaining about their boss. And they were saying, he's so dogmatic. He never listens. And you had to hear them. It was, and finally the guy I was with said, I have a question. Is this a setup? Are they actors?
I was going to ask that too. Like, was that the coworkers and you've been in secret?
I couldn't have done this in my mind's eye. I said, no,
Right.
but I think you better pay attention. So after dinner, we sat on a bench. It was spring, and we sat on a bench, and he talked about, I finally said, what was it like with your father? And he said, my father never listened to anybody. He had all the answers, and it was his way or the highway. And I said, but that's what they're saying about you. No, I'm not like that. I said, you really are like that. Anyway, I said, look, we have another day and a half. And I kept thinking, selling sweaters sounds good to me. I didn't know I was going to be able to break through. But in the morning, before we went back in, he said, Sylvia, I had a crazy dream last night. And he said, in the dream, my father came to me. His father had passed away. He said, my father came to me and said, I really never listened to you, and I'm sorry. And I hope you do a better job. He was talking family. He said, with your son, but I hope you do a better job. So before we went into the meeting, the guy said to me, I had this dream, and they do. This kind of work does spark dreams. I probably ought to write a book just about the dreams people have. But anyway, he said, what are we going to do to change what's going on? I said, well, you're going to have to tell the truth. You don't have to spill your whole family background. This is not a place for that, but you have to tell the truth. So we go in and I pull the group together, and it's kind of, the air is very thick and people are thinking we've got to sit through another day of this mess. Anyway, and he said, "May I start?" And I thought, if he does what he did yesterday, I think I'm going to cancel the rest of it. And I'm going to send everybody home. I'm not sitting through another day of that, right?
Right.
And but remember, I said to him, you don't have to tell your whole story, just what really matters. And he simply said, I thought about what happened yesterday and I did it out of fear. He actually was able to say that. When I said it's my way or the highway, I was afraid to hear what you were going to say. He said, I'm going to be quiet. I'm letting Sylvia take charge as she's supposed to, and I want to listen to you. He said, but just try to be kind. Just that relaxed the whole room. And by the end of the day, yes, he was able to say that he had played favorites. He was giving 2 or 3 people that he kind of liked better. It wasn't that they were better salespeople,
Right.
more things to do, some of the perks got to them. And he said, at the end, he said, well, I have to show you. I have this here. Right on my desk. It's been here for years. I'll show it to you in a minute. I'll flash it and show you. And he said, I am willing to change. I am willing to look at why I became so argumentative and dogmatic. And he said, and I'm willing to listen to you. And he said, I'd like us to set up monthly meetings with Sylvia so we can go over this. The atmosphere in the room was so different. So I'm going to go to the end of the year. This was in spring. It was like in March or April. I go to the end of the year and he calls and said, listen, or the beginning of the next year, he said, we hit targets and went beyond in sales like we've never done before. And he said, we're working together and we're having fun and we're having a big party and we want to invite you. I said, sure, I'll be there. And
Let's
at
go.
the end of it, they gave out, I don't think you'll be able to see what it says because it's in there, but they gave out these
We can
little,
see it.
can you
Courage
see?
to change. That's awesome.
Everybody was given one of these, and I've had it for years now and keep it on my desk. And in moments when I'm working with an individual or a team that's really having problems, I just look over at that and I say, keep going.
That is awesome. Thank you for that. Thank you for
Well,
it's it is interesting, like how everything that you're doing does tie back to like how people haven't changed, right? They've taken on these identities of their childhood or certain things that have happened, and they feel like they've changed because it's always, I don't want to be like, right? I don't want to be like, but then they end up being like that. But it is nice that you're able to stand in front of them and say, no, it's one-on-one. We got to have to change this. Like we have to be real about it so that they can understand and make that change. And I'm happy for them. I hope their business is thriving. So who are your ideal clients? What are the types of businesses that you work with or people that you work with and on a day-to-day basis, in case there is somebody out there that may be in that line?
And my ideal client is somebody who says it's not working and we need to do it differently. And for me, it's been interesting because, I've worked with a very large company that does cement. They build plants and they're the cement people. I
Right.
mean, what do I know about cement? I've worked with pretty high level scientists and, I appreciate cardiology. I'm not a cardiologist, but another one I've worked with in one of the big pharmas, I got a call and this woman was beyond brilliant. She wasn't as much of a quote ogre as the guy I just mentioned, but she was determined that she was going to win the Nobel Prize for medicine or something like that. And she had her team, they were doing some pretty advanced research in cardiology, which she attempted to explain to me. And yeah, it was way too high. I mean, she'd use these big scientific words, and I'd say, not for me. I'm not
Right.
dumb, but, I'm not that smart. Anyway, but she said to me one day, Sylvia, she said, these people want to go home by 7 o'clock at night. And I said, you've got to be kidding. They want to go home by 7 o'clock at night? I said, what are you talking about?
Right.
Oh, she said, but we're going to break through with this research. And she had to begin to see, she came from another country. I don't need to go into the details about it, but it had been a communist country and everything had been shut down. And when she came here, it was one of those, she had $10 in her purse and, had to start
Epic.
over as a young woman. And it was a very dramatic story, but her drive for this award brought her whole team. There was almost a mutiny. I mean, they were all saying, "We're out of here. I can't do it anymore." And she had an incredible team, so she had to begin to see that her passion was not as much passion as trying to prove that she was okay and that what she did was good enough. And I believe that telling the truth is a very important thing at work.
Yes.
Now, here, I think this should be on every wall in every office. Telling the truth is not spilling your guts.
There is a difference. There really
There's
is.
a big difference. Telling the truth comes, and I call it a heart truth, HEART.
Mhm.
And what most people hear when I say heart truth is they hear the word hard, HARD. It's a hard truth. It's hard to
Right.
say.
Right.
So I said, well, heart truths are hard to say. And I'd like to give
Mm.
this to whoever's listening. This is really an important piece of it. When you tell the truth, as I said, telling the truth is not spilling your guts. It's a disciplined art form. It's what she had to say to them was, I've been driving all of you too hard because of my own personal determination. And it wasn't even as much about finding this to help people as it was making me feel better.
Right.
And I apologize for that. And everybody has families. I have a family, she said, and they have been getting the short end of the stick too. And, we are not going to be driving and staying till 7 o'clock at night anymore. We're going to be able, and if you need to go to a soccer game or you need to go to a child's play or something, or somebody's ill, or you have a parent you have to tend to, I will hear that now because I want us to work together. And they did some award-winning, and she never won a Nobel Prize, but they did some award-winning thing because she was able to see what she was doing as their boss, which is pretty interesting. But here's what I want to say about hard truths and heart truths. Okay? They're
Mhm.
short, disciplined sentences. They're not run-on sentences. And if
Mm.
you're upset with somebody and you tell them what you did really upset me because it put me back, it made me feel insignificant, that's a heart truth. And then you got to be careful because a lot of people would then say,
Mm.
and furthermore is the
Right.
trap. Okay?
Now
I
we're
mean, we've all
spilling your
we've all done
guts.
it, but it's literally rewiring. In the new book, in the Glimmers book, I talk about the internal navigation nervous system, which is head, heart, and gut, and aligning the three systems. The head, we've used that a lot. The head
Right.
is for all the things we can check the box with. The heart, and Dan Goleman did a great job of bringing emotional intelligence into the world so you can begin to see each other as really human beings. And the gut, which is now very important, is the oldest of all. It's where we learned, or is it safe? Or am I safe? You know, do I have to be careful? And when you align all three, and that's a big part of this Glimmers book, is really getting into how you use your intelligence and your brain and your head to think things through, how you listen with your heart, and also what does your gut tell you? Sometimes it says, be careful. Sometimes it says, go ahead, it's safe. But you gotta understand that. And then you're in what in the day now we're calling coherence. It's
Yeah.
aligned. That's what we have to do. So I
Mm.
hope I'm giving you some information that's helpful.
No, no, it's very helpful. It's not only helpful, but it's insightful too. I am that curious person. I'm always thinking about, and part of it is my ADHD. The other part of it is I'm one of those, I had to get out of my own logical mind just to even have uh, emotional conversations with significant others, right? Because they wanted to have the emotional conversation. And I'm like, but that doesn't logically make sense to me. Like, my brain can't compute why you could be angry when logically this is it. And it's like, well, I had to disconnect that, break it down. So I understand like where my logic comes from my childhood of like being the middle child. I was always wrong. And so I'm like, I always had to have the facts and the ducks in a row so I can say, no, 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 at this time, this happened with these things with my brothers. And it never went away, right? And I had to face that fact when I fell in love, right? And so,
Yeah.
it is, interesting as you're saying, and I'm like, man, and it's like bringing up these memories and thoughts, and I can understand how like it can really drastically change when you're in charge of 10 people, 50 people, 100 people, and how that trickled down can be the sole reason why you're stagnant. And people could put money in ads, money in people, money in things, and never go anywhere because it's them themselves that's holding it back. So I really like that insight and how you're bringing things together and aligning it from the back to forth, but also so that they can see it from other people are saying it. It's not just, them saying it to themselves. It's other people that are affected by that weight on their shoulders. So I do see that. I like it. It's really awesome.
I'm taking you on the road with me. And I'll just say, here's somebody who knows how to talk about the glimmers effect. There you are. You're doing a great job. You're right. Actually, because you agree with me.
Yes, yes, I agree with you 100%. It makes so much sense. I didn't think about it in that way, and until you said it, and I'm like, man, I can't imagine how many business owners right now are plateaued and they're hiring every marketer and CMO and anything under the sun,
Yeah.
and it's just not working, right? And it's like they need to have that conversation with you where you can dive into it all. And so I definitely understand that. Well, how are you like? I see how much you genuinely care about like not only a business owners, but like them personally, their feelings, their emotions. But what do you like outside of business when you're not working, right? And you don't bring it to work? What do you do outside of work? And what do you like to do in your spare time?
Well, until recently, a lot of travel. And I've been very fortunate that, since COVID, travel has changed. And
Yeah.
right now, traveling is not a lot of fun. So we're doing less of it. But when I did a values proposition once and I looked, it was embarrassing because other people in the room are saying, oh, well, they want to make a difference in the world. And, people want to help starving children. Sylvia said, I just want adventure. Thought, oh my God, how superficial can you be? But it's the
I get
truth.
it. Somebody said, what would you want to do? I said, I want to travel the world eating all the different foods. And he was like, oh yeah, and help a bunch of people while I'm doing
Yeah.
it. So
You're my
I
kind of
understand
guy.
it.
Yeah, I'll add that at the end. But I remember thinking, well, can you really be that superficial? But and I love to write. I love words. And, you know, I don't want to get into all the complexities of AI because we don't know. It's still new. I mean, I will ask AI some questions, but then I'll go off and I'll write, what I want to write. And at some point, I'd like to do a screenplay, so where it will go, will it ever be on Broadway? I don't think so, but
We'll
who the
see.
hell knows,
Never know.
because of the adventure. And I'll just tell you this because it's just an interesting story. I was doing family therapy, right? And I got divorced. My kids were teenagers, and it was my ex-husband's a very nice man. We were about as mismatched as you could be, you know, but he's a nice guy. And, my daughters will say, well, why did you and dad marry? I said, well, he was really good looking and I wanted nice looking children. And I thought, oh, that's a little superficial, Sylvia. But I was in my early 20s, I was 22 when I got married. Anyway, he's a very nice man. He's remarried. I'm remarried. And all that, works well. But after the divorce, I thought, I don't know if I can still do family therapy, but I have to find myself. And somebody was taking a group of women on a trip to Egypt. Okay. Sounded
Mhm.
very exotic. And I needed something. So off I go to Egypt. And one evening, one of the other gals said, well, so and so and I want to go climb the pyramid. And I thought, well, that sounds crazy, but interesting. And I like something different. I like adventure, right?
You're
So
right.
off we go and we climbed the pyramid. I did not know this. I am telling you, this is the truth. I didn't know it was illegal. I didn't know.
Oh, so you in like
Ever.
one of the ones in like Mexico where it's illegal?
Well, and
Oh,
this
that you
was in
said you were in
Egypt.
Egypt. Egypt. Oh,
Egypt.
yeah,
It's
they are
illegal.
illegal in Egypt too. Yeah.
The Great Pyramid. But anyway, I'm off. I'm doing adventure, and off we go. And somebody walked over and said to the three of us, "What do you want?" And one of the gals said, "Well, we want to climb." And they said, "Well, you can't do it by yourself." And I'm looking up at this thinking, I don't know if I can do it, period. And they said, "Just wait here." And they sent a guy, and he said, "I will take you." And we climbed the Great Pyramid. And it was at 2 o'clock in the morning, we got to the top of the pyramid. And there used to be like a wood structure to show where it peaked, but it was flat at that point. But here's what happened. As we finally climbed over to the flat land, on one of the wood structures was a sticker. We weren't the first one who's ever done this. And it said world peace all the way to, and I remember starting to cry, and I thought, okay, that's another piece of my puzzle. So when
Hmm.
you say, what do I do besides this? I do like to look at where I can help with situations to help people begin to communicate differently about, you know, differences around the world. So I'm not leading these, but I'm helping and being part of it. And it came from that moment at the top of the pyramid, seeing that somebody else had left a placard that said world peace.
Little trinket for you.
Yeah. Little message. Pay attention.
I love that. I love that. I want to thank you so much for coming on to this podcast with me today. It has been a blast to not only, hear about the different businesses that you've helped and the transformations that people have gone through working with you, but also being able to, anyone listening, being able to take a step back and kind of self-assess just in that time frame, right? I'm mid-podcast. I'm kind of self-assessing too, right? And I think that that's awesome that in such a short time you can get people to step back and go, wow, am I self-sabotaging not only my business but my employees with things that I already have doing? And I feel like that is something everyone should do. We need to be more aware and we should be looking at those. And that's why they need to know your 13 patterns. So thank
Yeah.
you
And
so
self
much.
awareness is the advantage. I do want to do one quick pitch for me.
Sure.
May I do it?
Yeah.
I have put the programs we were doing in retreat since COVID, we shape shifted them and they're online. So there is Total Leadership Connections. It's a 4-module program that you can do and get some coaching along with it, which goes into the depth of looking at many different areas of coaching. And it's online and it's really good. And, you know, that's my pitch.
That's awesome. How can people get in touch with that? Do you have a website? Can they reach out to you through email?
Yeah.
What's the best way to, if they want that, or if they even have just questions to ask you before jumping in, how can they reach out to you and get access to that?
Well, the name of the company is Creative Energy Options, which is CEO for short.
Nice.
So, yeah. And if they go, it's www.ceoptions, ceoptions.com. And on there, they can see some of the things we're doing and also other webinars and different things we have, but also the programs. There's one for women called Gutsy. And, there's one about stress and the total leadership connections, and they can get my email there and contact me if they like.
Awesome. Thank you again. I'm going to make sure I take all of that information, put it in the bio so that people can get easy access to it and click on that and they can reach out to you. And even if you don't know and you're kind of in that place of like, man, this sounds like something, but maybe I'm too early, too soon, I don't know. I still think that that's the perfect time to reach out to make sure, right? You're only going to take on anybody you can help and if it's what's best for them. So even if you're not ready and maybe you feel like it's something in the future, reach out now so you know what it's like to prepare to get ready for bringing Sylvia inside of your business. So thank you again so much for
Thank
having
you.
being on my podcast today.
Been lovely. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all for watching. And if you, like I said, if you really want, like what you see, like and comment, and then reach out to Sylvia if you have any questions. And if you have an interesting business and are doing amazing things like she's doing, you can also reach out to me at Tavious@fixmyfeesteam.com to be on the podcast. Thank you all for watching and have a wonderful night.